Hello viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I will be discussing the story The Neighborhood Watch from the anthology A Silent Song and Other Stories. This story is quite interesting because of the investigative bit of it. And from this story and the previous story that we just discussed, that is Checkmate, I tend to have an opinion that writing is just like being an investigative journalist. In the Checkmate, we were able to realize the ways with which there is corruption and fraud in corporate societies. And that is the same thing with this story, The Neighborhood Watch, where we unpackage or we demystify the life that exists in the street. Apart from the story that we read, the story A Silent Song, where there was the aspect or the plight of street children. In this story, there is something about the street families. And the street family on the spotlight here is the family that has styled itself the Neighborhood Watch. It has 5 members, and from the most senior member, we have Elias, Lazarus, then there is Silas, there is Omagano, who is the only female in this group, and then lastly we have Martin. The writer of this story, Rem'Y Ngamije, that hails from Rwanda and lives in Namibia, brings out the ways with which street life dehumanizes various street families. And these street families may not be blood relatives, but they are just people or street people who come together to form families. So there are ways in which these families have been dehumanized, and they come out quite succinctly in the story The Neighborhood Watch. The first way is the challenge with food. So there is inadequate food on the streets because these are families who do not earn their living from any work. They survive on literal begging, like we realize that this family really survives a lot from the hands of a Mrs. Ben, who is Denot. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly. That is in the Eros suburb. Again, they earn their food from Elias. Being this kind of amiable person, he is friendly to the kitchen staff at various city hotels and restaurants, and they are able to give him some leftovers to share with this group. Then lastly, the family normally get their food by foraging through the various bins. So there is a challenge with food, and added to that is the trauma with which this family goes through while seeking for food in the various bins. And there was a time that they even came across a newborn baby with umbilical cord twisted around the neck. That was the height of the trauma. There are also minor cases of the traumatic situations that they have with these foraging bit. They find shit, old food, used condoms, and all other things that are quite shameful and embarrassing in those bins. Again, there is the aspect of disease. They get infected with the various diseases, but then they don't get access to various health amenities where they can find treatment. Like, for instance, in the story, Elias has a racking cough. The cough becomes worse each day. Sometimes there is blood in the gang from his chest, but he normally waves everyone concerned away. He says that blood is life, and at the same time, blood is death. So the street life has kind of dehumanized him to an extent that he cares not about his health. Then there is the bit of pessimism. On the streets, this family, the neighborhood watch, becomes pessimistic. And one person who carries their pessimism is the eldest member of the neighborhood watch, and that is Elias. Elias normally tells Lazarus that the street has no future, there is only today, and uses personification that the street snacks on those who regret and those who dream of a tomorrow. He continues to say that today one needs shelter, today one needs to take care of, today one needs food. That the street has no future and there is only today. So the kind of despondent attitude, the kind of pessimism with which the neighborhood watch looks into the future also comes as a result of the street life dehumanizing this family. Then again, there are the constant fights in the streets. There is some kind of anarchy and lawlessness. Nobody knows the law, and this comes out where the narrator says that the neighborhood watch territory has been defended against more than once against a rival posse, to mean that there are people who have also been laying claim to the bridge's underside where this family lives. Any encroachment promises a bloody reprisal. There is no clear-cut way of really easing the tension that there is between the rival posses in the street. Though CBD is an open market for everyone, young upstarts attempt to cordon off particularly fruitful blocks and alleys, and they become brazen and will beat up an old man they find rooting around a bin. Lazarus, a member of the neighborhood watch, also comes out as someone who is thirsty for fights, and his presence in a fight drastically changes a bookie's odds. So there is some kind of fighting, some kind of anarchy with which these street families have been dehumanized. Then we also have the stealing, and the street families have been dehumanized, and all kind of manners, they have been deprived of all kind of manners and decency, and stealing is the order of the day. An example here is that of Silas. Silas and Martin in the neighborhood watch family have been assigned to be the valuable crew. That is to mean that they're the people who look for essentials like discarded blankets and mattresses, and they are also expected to loiter around construction sites and find any other valuable thing to take back to their headquarters, that is, on the bridge's underside, where this family lives, quote unquote. And as they loiter around the construction sites and in the shopping mall parking lots, they look for something to filch. Apart from that, Silas has a habit of discovering things that have had previous owners. And that is quite a humorous way through the use of euphemism to mean stealing. And funnily enough, Martin reminds him that he needs not to be Christopher Columbus, who was a discoverer. Again, there is the child and female exploitation. Those who live in the streets have been dehumanized, and it is quite sad to find Elias, who is the eldest member of this family, when they go out with Lazarus and Omegano, who is the only female in this family, and he does not have the $10 or maybe $20 to bribe the guards to allow them entry into some of the fenced bins. He gives Amugano to maybe guards who go at the back of the dumpster and do what they have to do so that they are allowed entry into that bin. And that amounts to the sexual exploitation that goes on in the streets. Again, they love children. These families love recruiting children because of their nimbleness and loyalty, and quite untold possibility could be put in short, achieved when they have children. Again, there is what I call the disdain for emancipation. So on the streets, these street families are dehumanized to a point that they loathe their freedom. They do not want to be set free. And this comes out from the resigned attitude by Elias. Elias believes that the street snacks on those who regret. There is no tomorrow on the streets. There is only today. And today is food. Today is shelter. Today is surviving for today. That justifies the answer that he gives to Silas, who asks him that if this lady, Mrs. Benzuidenat, really loves them and cares for them, why can't Elias ask for maybe some shelter, maybe some place in her compound to accommodate them? And Elias states that this Mrs. Benzuidenat takes more than she gives to them. Hers is to give, and theirs is to take, and take. She takes from them the street life. And it is quite interesting that there seems to be some interest on the part of Elias that they keep living on the street and there should be no hope of really bringing them out of the street. And this is not the first thing this could be happening. There is a movie I watched about escape from Sobibor. Sobibor was one of the concentration camps that had been introduced by the dictator of Germany, Hitler, with an effort or an attempt to exterminate Jews. And what happened was that when there was a planned escape from Sobibor, there were many people who were just standing there. They could not run because their spirit had been broken to a point that they found pleasure in their incarceration. And that is exactly what happens here in this story. Again comes the police harassment. So this story, the street life of this family, the Neighbourhood Watch, also exposes some kind of moral decadence in the police force. In case of a spate of robberies or even high-end murder, it occurs that the police come for the street people and use them as scapegoats to plead guilty to having committed maybe a crime that they have not committed. And sad enough, it occurs that some street people who are tired with the life on the streets and with the allure of food and shelter in the various police dungeons, police cells and prisons really accept to this. Then again, this comes out when the police run after Elias and Lazarus, when one of their comrades, that is Amos, dies, and the police are really trying to force them to plead guilty, and they are adamant, they remain principled, and they would not plead guilty. We see the police give them thorough beating before releasing them. Then again, we have the challenge with the shelter. The Neighbourhood Watch, that is the family on the street family on the spotlight, shelters at the bridges underside, and there are no beds there. There are just some large boxes of television screens which had been discarded. Those are what they use to sleep on. So they have been dehumanized to a point that they feel that their headquarters, as they refer to the place where they normally spend on, offers some kind of privilege. That is, it's the only place that remains dry during the rain, and it wards off some cold during winter. So they are satisfied with the undignified place where they call home, quote unquote.